Happy Monday, everybody. How's it going?
It's going well. Good to see you, Joe. Welcome, Serge.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. I'm Serge Gershkovich. I am a developer advocate at SqlDBM, and my background is in database architecture. So that's kind of my bread and butter. But in my new role, I'm more of product owner, LinkedIn personality, writer, what have you. Still trying to figure that part out, really. But Snowflake superhero.
Oh, really? Interesting. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So you mentioned writer, yeah, LinkedIn person. So yeah, which one of the things do you want to talk about first then? So.
Let's do modeling. I think most people came here for the modeling. I don't think they came here for my smile or my.
We're talking data modeling too, not fashion modeling with Serge's smile here. So, yes, data modeling. I think it's an interesting topic. We wanted to talk about, and it's interesting too because this is a topic that we've had, I think, several other talks on recently, and it seems to be, for better or for worse, kind of the. It's a popular topic these days. Data modeling.
It's popular, but it's weirdly contentious. I don't know. I mean, would you agree, Joe? You've seen a little bit of contention.
Couldn't tell.
On LinkedIn.
Yeah. Couldn't tell at all. No, not contentious at all. Didn't get a lot of hate mail and threads full of vitriol aimed at both Serge and me, actually. So no, not contentious at all. It's a very civil topic.
Learning experience.
Oh yes, indeed.
You wonder why more people don't get into it, given the welcome we got.
It's like being introduced by a gang when you get to a new city. It's great. So yeah, what's in your mind with data modeling, Serge?
Quite a bit, but I thought that, as some people know, I kind of made a post the other day that the best way to get yourself to do something is social contract. Admit publicly that you're going to do it. So I am writing a book on the topic, and we can talk about kind of what led me to even embark on such a preposterous endeavor. But
we can empathize, and we also think you're crazy too. So
yeah.
I
kind of wanted to define it first for everybody, since a lot of people come to it with completely fresh eyes, and there's a lot of interest, obviously, but a lot of it is because people have just excluded it from their tool set in the data world, and are only now, once they're bumping up against size limits or just the limits of their brain power or how much a single data team can keep inside their heads, now it's starting to come back in vogue. So I know that you're also working on a book on the same topic, and given all that, I don't think we're even stepping on each other's toes in terms of how much there is to say.
Well, in fact, we had a call right when you found out when I found out you're writing your book and you found out I was writing mine. I think we immediately had a call just to make sure we weren't stepping on each other's toes. And I think it was a nice call in the sense where there's just so much ground to cover. And the way I also see it too is knowledge is it's a multiplicative game. It's not a zero-sum game. Just because Serge writes his data modeling book doesn't mean I can't write mine, and just because you write posts on it doesn't mean that other people can't, and so forth. I think much to the chagrin of maybe some pundits out there, but yeah. So
how would you guys describe the differences? So it sounds like you did kind of hash this out. So what part of the universe do you want to cover, Serge, and what part do you want to cover, Joe?
Serge?
Yeah, let me start. So the book I'm writing is I chose kind of a strange mix. I chose to write a book about Snowflake modeling, but one that would also cover the basics of relational modeling as a practice, something that's been around.
Just to clarify, not Snowflake dimensional modeling, but the Snowflake, the database.
Yeah, exactly. Snowflake database. Got it. Snowflake Cloud Platform. I don't think they're calling themselves a database anymore. They're
it's a data cloud. Yes.
Yes. And I kind of why I did it, and then, well, first what I'm doing, and then why I did it. So I wanted to write a book about Snowflake because it's where my expertise is. I can talk about, you know, my journey with Snowflake, how I started, how I kind of rose up the ranks to become a superhero. But I wanted to focus there, but I realized that having spoken to other professionals, other users, they did not have the fundamentals, and I couldn't blame them, because I myself, as a database architect working primarily on the data warehouse, not on a transactional operational database, I've often lived without models, and you know, you can always get it done one way or another. The final deliverable is not a diagram. The final deliverable is a dashboard, or it's a data load, or it's a data transfer. So one way or the other, you get it done. No one's going to chastise you for not having a diagram to go along with it. But that's the approach that I figured, if I can explain it from the ground up, like how would you even begin a project, and how it can become a living artifact of, once you start it, it can guide you through the entire journey, from building the architecture, the landscape, to doing the transformational side of writing your create table as, your views, which traditionally have really not covered under the modeling umbrella, and use that then as a living document to transmit and make analysis easier, transmit that to the data science team, the ML team, the business users, who, you know, maybe are not so technical, but anyone can look at a conceptual model and very quickly get an idea for what's in the database. So I thought I can start there, and then I can give people a compelling reason to do it, to say, look, here's the semantics, here's the language, here's the terminology, and here's a unique, efficient, Snowflake specific way to do what Kimball envisioned all those years ago. Here's streams, here's dynamic tables, to put it into context of, it's not just some conceptual kind of esoteric idea, but this is how you can actually do it right, save credits in the process, and build an effective architecture end to end.
That's super cool. Yeah, I think it's definitely a book that needs to exist in the universe. You know, I think from what Matt and I have seen with Snowflake users, specifically to, you know, to the point of your book, it's great platform, undeniably. I would say, you know, amazing, right? And the tool is it's easy to use and it's flexible, which I think also allows for sort of doing anything you want if you aren't aware of practices like data modeling, which surprisingly enough, you know, you come to find out that a lot of, I would say, modern analytical practitioners in particular are not aware of data modeling. I can say this from a fair number of anecdotal examples that this is indeed true, very true. So, and I think this is also one of the reasons why data modeling is becoming a topic again. We always kind of go through these cycles where, as I tend to rehash on other shows, but you know, the pendulum keeps swinging back and forth, and right now the pendulum is swinging back towards data modeling. So it's practices that are somehow forgotten.
Well, I mean, I think there's a pretty obvious reason why these were forgotten. Maybe there are multiple reasons, but we're in an era of like extreme democratization. In other words, you don't have to go sign a multi-million-dollar contract to get access to an amazing, you know, scalable data processing system. But the problem is, all of a sudden, you're turning people loose with, like, you know, a car with 100,000 horsepower or something with no training. It's like, here you go, here's Snowflake. You can do whatever you want with it, and that's exactly what people do.
Well, and what happens, though, I think one of the results is, yeah, you can throw a lot of computation, you know, and a lot of storage at a problem. That still doesn't mean that your data model might not be inscrutable and incomprehensible, right? And I think that's sort of, I think, one of the things I'm really glad that Serges is bringing to the table with his book is, you know, I argue in my book, a lack of a data model is still a data model, and I'll get into my definition of what a data model is in a bit. But you know, but not all data models are created equal, and the you know, the purpose of data modeling is to represent you know, that tiny slice of reality you're trying to capture, you know, in such a way that it's believable and understandable to people, right? So if it's not believable or understandable, you can throw any amount of computation and horsepower at all day. It still won't make any sense. And I think this is what a lot of data teams are seeing right now. Is there's a lot of power. And there's great tools like DBT out there. It still doesn't. It lets you move fast, which is great, but without an underlying sense of theory. Being a practitioner without a sense of theory is, I don't think it's a great place to be. So
absolutely, I think the best analogy I've been able to come up with is buying furniture at IKEA, and we've all had that moment of bravado of saying, "Yeah, I got this. I don't need no stinking manual. I can put this together," which is true if what you've bought is that cheap little table with the 4 legs that you just screw in. Yeah, probably not. You'd probably be wasting your time with the manual. But anything that is a little bit more nuanced than that, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Like you can absolutely get it done, but you're going to get it done. You're going to look at it and you say, "Oh, screws left over, and that part that kind of looks important laying over there." So yes, you're going to get it done. And then how many times are you going to get it redone, readjusted, fixed because it was wobbly when you built it? And how many times did you have to call IKEA and say, "Where does this part go?" When again, the manual ships with the product. When modeling was invented in, you can kind of paint the history of when did it actually come into its own. Like the first, you can argue that the Chen notation, when it was first kind of being hashed out, wasn't so intuitive, didn't translate well to the physical database. But nowadays, not only is the model, like I mentioned, kind of, when I said living, I meant that in the real sense of it starts from just boxes and it evolves to something that is a one-to-one mapping with your physical database structure. So it's not like, I know the word model is kind of, it implies a simplification, which it can be if you visualize it. It's still the same data, but the human mind, the cognitive capacity is very much visual. So you can look at 10 tables, 20 tables, and you can very quickly visually try to understand and get a good concept of what it is, how they relate to each other, what they're doing. Whereas if you see them laid out in text or as a list, it's not as intuitive. So today you can look at a model and there's tools that let you kind of switch back and forth to, you've got the lowest granularity, you've got the atomic detail, but you can also just flip it and look at it as boxes and lines if that's what you need to do in that moment, if you need to present it to your director or a stakeholder. So that's what I meant when there's really no excuse not to do it, when it's not separate. It is your database.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm taking a bit of a different approach with the book I'm writing, and it's I guess it's more of kind of like, I'm struggling with the title. I mean, the working title is practical data modeling, but it's not just for analytical people, right? It's actually what I think the fundamentals of data engineering highlighted a very important concept of the data engineering lifecycle. But what was really missing in that book, and on purpose a lot, is there's a whole life cycle of data modeling that just doesn't incorporate analytics. It's like you got from the time data is created, right? So if a user inputs data into a form, that goes into some sort of storage, hopefully. I'm giving an example here, right? That's the start of a data model, whether you like it or not. And again, how I define data modeling is simply a way of representing the reality you're trying to capture, right? In a way that's understandable and useful for machines or humans. And so under that guise, again, this isn't a new definition. This actually goes back to very, very old definitions, countless of them actually. But if we take that at its word, what this means is data model really starts upstream from the beginning, and everything flows from that, right? And so when you're writing an application, for example, that captures maybe, again, user input from a form, that data is captured in a database. This database, it may have tables that are constructed according to, normalization, or it might not, right? And so what's interesting is when you go upstream to software engineers, the practices of relational modeling are actually lost as well. I would point to things like things like object relational mappers, maybe a disdain for SQL as being two culprits here among many. But you have an equally easy time, I would say, doing things very fast when you're writing software. I would actually make an argument that things like DBT started and got their inspiration from software engineering. When you look at what Jinja templates were, I mean, that was literally no different than how you would abstract ORM code back in the day, and Django, Rails, and everything else, right? And so, and many other ORMs that came before. And they had, so what I see happening is the practices of relational modeling, or even, which is considered best practice, right? I mean, and it's algebraically complete, and it's predicate logic and everything else, right? It should be the thing that people pay attention to, and it's the thing I've seen a lot of software engineers simply don't care about. And so, but this has consequences downstream now, right? So if you're doing change data capture into, say, a data warehouse, now your analyst gets to deal with this. A lack of a coherent model upstream means that you get to figure this out now, and on and on and on, right? This also means that the data scientist who is making a machine learning model off of this data, well, now they get to figure this out too. And so it's really, and event streaming as well is another thing, right? Where event streams have kind of its own paradigm of model or lack thereof. And so it's really, what I'm trying to write is really a recognition that data modeling is very, it's not just the silos upon which I think we viewed models this whole time. It's actually a very complete life cycle, whose dependencies have consequences on downstream models. So that's the thesis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really hit the nail on the head with even that simple example of capturing form data, that it has to be part of your data model because it's part of your business model. You wouldn't just be capturing some form out there in the ether. Like, this form presumably has something to do with customer feedback or trial or survey, that it's not one model. It's a one-to-one with, did what you build in the database, does what you build in the database reflect what your business is doing on the front lines when they meet with clients, when they sell a product, when they run a promotion? Because most of the support tickets you would get as a database developer, as an architect, as an analyst is, I've defined my dimension X at a certain granularity, you're showing it at this other granularity, or you're missing this attribute, or this needs to be split out because, let's say, the form you're capturing, it's not just at an IP level or an email level, it's at a session level. So you might have multiple browser tabs. So if you've built it at one granularity, but your business expects to see it at multiple, then you have a problem. You have to go back to the drawing board. So it's really something that goes back and forth. Obviously, a developer is going to need more precision, more detail, more resolution than a business user might, who just wants to maybe see how they're related to the promotion that they're gathering feedback on. But in the end, it's a tool that anyone can use, that the business can go and say, yep, that's right, go ahead, build it. Once you've built it, pass it on to the data science team, who can look and say, yep, that's right, we're analyzing promotions based on forms. Great. And where's the case to be made that this is not relevant? Who's going to go out and say, nah, I don't need no stinking catalog or a blueprint for what it is I'm trying to do? But it can happen when you find yourself in that frog in boiling water scenario of, well, we never had a data model, and I just used to ask the guy next to me. Now that guy's not there. What are you going to do now? And now that your database has grown from 10 tables to 100 or more. But again,
and a lot of it, I think, is just expedience.
Yeah.
Like, people just get a bunch of requests. They're like, let's respond. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think about the incentives of your job, though, on most data teams, right? I don't think the objectives are very clearly laid out, frankly, in a lot of data teams, because it's like, what you're like a report monkey, or you're responding ad hoc to requests. I mean, in a lot of cases, I think it's what Matt said, was expediently responding to requests as they come in, and that simply doesn't give you the mental bandwidth or the time to focus on doing things in a more formal manner. I mean, I think it's exactly why, right? Well, I would love to get to this, but I don't have enough time to do a data catalog, or I'd love to get this. I don't have enough time to, to make an ERD, for example, or whatever, right? I just have to get this question answered.
Sure.
And what this ends up happening, I'm sure you've seen, Serge, is just you get like, I see the term spaghetti SQL thrown around, and this is certainly one consequence of it. I also think, spaghetti outcomes is another one, where the outcomes of the what you're trying to report on simply make no sense at all. That's just the consequence of Matt and I say data. Matt and I say, data has entropy, and in a dynamic system like what you just described, entropy is fast occurring entropy is one of the consequences. So
yeah. So kind of to bring it back to the haters and to the gatekeepers that are saying, no, modeling
our favorite people.
Is this, it's only in this format, it must follow these rules. My whole take on it is specifically, these are not the people I'm writing a book for, first of all. So
yeah,
they're not my target audience. But that's besides the point. The point really is, I'm seeing people on the front lines. These gurus, let's call them, obviously they know what they're doing. If they're consulting with a client, they're going to build the data model to their spec, to their standard, to sixth normal form or what have you. They'll get the job done. But when I see analysts, business users struggling every day because they just can't make sense of what they're looking at, these are the people that I think with a very minimal amount of effort and education and training can get so much more out of their data experience, out of their self-service. And that's who my audience will be.
Yeah,
hopefully,
that's awesome. I'm the same way. Like I'm basically, I'm in the same boat as you. Like I think the approach is just to provide, I'm not going to tell you an opinionated way of doing stuff. I'm going to give you, some techniques. If you want to do things fast, here's some ways to do things. If you want to do things more formally, here's some ways to do things. And just understand there will be trade-offs, right? But I don't think neither of us are taking a religious viewpoint on this, where, if you're not doing sixth normal form, you're absolutely human trash and you should not have a job, right? I've been reading certain books lately. One of them is CJ Date's 50 Years of Databases book. I think CJ's done a remarkable job at capturing the field of relational databases and orthodoxy. I also feel like the book is full of shit talking on nearly everybody in the industry, and I think it does CJ a huge disservice. I mean, his whole argument is, because relational is, it's mathematically provable because it uses set theory. I'm sure Matt and I could dissect this argument in a bit more detail if we wanted to. There are some arguments against, set theory being complete, but there are also some other arguments that, because it's first order predicate logic, therefore, this will stand the test of time. Which, I mean, if you're Aristotelian logic, sure. But the whole thing, the argument that CJ gets to as well, you wouldn't build because it's mathematically complete, therefore it's scientific. Right. And so and he says, well, you wouldn't build a bridge against, not using the laws of science. Like, why would you build a database not using the laws of science? I'm like, look, I think what we've been doing is good enough. Maybe it's not, mathematically rigorous, but the fact that companies like Google, Amazon have built their businesses upon, systems that seem to get the job done, even though they're not, I would say, completely relational according to the strict definition of COD, for example. It doesn't abdicate. It doesn't take anything away from what's happening. So I think these are false comparisons in some way. So
exactly, a lot of these cloud platforms, they don't have foreign keys, for example. They don't have constraints, or they don't enforce constraints, and people seem to be doing great things with them just fine. But actually, that's a really good point. I wanted to ask you. I know you met recently with one of the godfathers of data warehousing. So like you said, there is the shit talking side of things, but someone who's a bit more level-headed, like Bill Inman, does people kind of his stature have any opinion on where is the blame in terms of best practice modeling? Why have they not done a good enough job of educating the kiddies of how to do things right? And why are so many people taking shortcuts, and why are so many people scratching their head saying, we don't know, the data looks bad and we don't know what to do with it?
I mean, I'd obviously need to get Bill on the show to have him give his exact reason, but you know, from conversations with him, I you know, reading between the lines, you know, I've never asked him the specific question actually, but I think we talked about the notion of integrating data, for example. I think this highlights maybe the answer you're looking for. I mean, it's hard work at the end of the day. A lot of the stuff is hard work. Understanding your business and your data is hard work, and so it's easier to sort of punt, you know, and just you know, do the second best thing or the fifth best thing or whatever. So I think that's the reason, really, and yeah, I mean, we talked about this a bit, I think, in the context of just negativity in the industry too. It was interesting, I think, back in his day, especially in the, you know, the 70s and 80s, there was a lot more of this kind of vitriolic bashing of people. I think a lot of people felt like, you know, the industry was very much a zero-sum game. Like, you know, you win at my expense, right? So there was a lot more contention. You know, that was his experience with it. You know, I mean, you know, we sat there for hours just talking about the history of kind of the whole industry, and that was a lot of fun. But you know,
it was.
Yeah, it's cool. He's got good stories.
The guy's in his 70s, and he just wrote 2 books,
Yeah.
not 1 but 2. So there's still a lot.
Yeah, he's got another one too. It's gonna be great.
Doesn't seem to be slowing down. Yeah,
he's not slowing down at all. He's got a business and everything. It's cool. But what's interesting with him is, you know, he took his he did a data warehousing is like the thing that's not on his mind these days. It hasn't been on his mind for like the last 20 years. He's been focusing on text and text data modeling. It's you know, and so, you know, he showed me some tricks with that, and I think it was pretty awesome to see, you know, just how his mind works, and you know, the provable wins as he's gotten with the, you know, what he calls textual ETL. So it's really cool, like just seeing how he's just progressing the field, and I think the people he wants to hang out with are just the people that are really pushing the field forward. And you know, if you're going to be sitting there slamming everybody, and the number one thing he told me was, you know, I think he learned early on, like, negativity is going to get you nowhere. You know, like shit talking people, all this stuff. It's like it's short-term wins, you know, if you can even call that a win. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, and it just makes you look stupid. So you know, he does his best not to do that kind of stuff. So anyway, but to answer your question, yeah, I think it's just why aren't these practices as common? I would say it's just because it's hard, you know. And as Matt said too, if you have to do things quickly, and you know, you don't have time to think about the hard things.
And I think we have to keep in mind that a lot of this pitch around modeling is a pitch to data practitioners, but it also needs to be a pitch to leadership and people paying the bills, people with budgets, to say, you've got to allocate time for your teams to get these things done. We kind of used to understand this in the 90s and early 2000s, and we've forgotten a lot of the lessons that we learned back then.
Mm-hmm. A really good book people should read is Larry Burns's was it Data Model Storytelling? I think the title is really good book. I think Larry's like one of the most underrated people in the industry. That guy is his level of thinking is just unreal. He's very very sharp. So yeah, interesting. So walk me through the process. I mean, you're writing a book right now. I think this is your first book, right, Serge?
Yeah, I've written articles, but never tackled an entire book before.
How's this going? Okay, so when you decided you're going to do a book, walk us through that. Like, what possessed you to do something that's crazy?
What possessed me was, honestly, it was seeing the need for this book at this time. And I had spoken to a lot of people that come and ask a legitimate question of, where do I start? And there, at least to me, there wasn't really a good all-in-one simple maybe even not geared towards someone technical kind of resource that would kind of walk you through from beginning to end and explain the business value as well as the technical value, and maybe give you a couple of recipes, because most modeling is generic. You don't really need to make it specific to any database. But when you have really innovative tools in one specific platform that can really put a spin and make things more efficient, more effective, then it almost builds the case of, this is why you should do it. This is why you can communicate with, let's say I say type 2 slowly changing dimension. I've communicated a lot of complexity with just those couple of words. And the more that you can say words and be on the same page as your colleagues without having to write them a paragraph of what a fact is or what a dimension is, the faster you move. So even in that context, it's the speed of getting things done. It can actually be the wind in your sails instead of extra work, extra homework you have to do at the end of a project. So that's the why. The how is also very, like, it's something that I think about, like, how did I end up here? How did I end up spending my nights writing a book? And it was obviously a fun project to do. I want to see this come to light, come to fruition, but it kind of makes me think about, like, how did my career even take the path to be in a place to be able to write this book? Because one thing is knowing your trade, knowing your craft, knowing the tools. The other is being able to communicate it. So you guys are well aware, better than most people, that understanding a technology is not the same thing as being able to explain it, expand on its pros and cons and its value add. And to me, it was just something that it took me, a good 20 years maybe to realize that the path that I kind of carved out for myself was just me following a cookie cutter kind of, this is what a developer does. You start learning the programming languages, then you become a junior, then you become a senior, then you manage a team, never once stopping to think, do I enjoy this? Do I love what I do? We can a lot of times stand in ability for passion. So I've never really struggled. I was very mathematical, logic minded. So SQL programming, you put in the work, you get the results. Not much there. But after a couple of decades of that and thinking, why am I not getting out of bed with a string in my step? Or how am I spending my time outside of work? And are there any parallels there? And for me, the answer was, wait a minute. Yes, I like reading. I like learning. I like teaching, even internally. Whenever I was part of a team, I always did my best to carve out time, usually like on a Friday, end of the week, low pressure, office hours. Let's all share what we learned this week. Did you find, did Snowflake release a new function? Is there a new table type or something or just a best practice, a better way of doing things, or an external tool? It's how we learned about DBT in where I used to work. Someone just said, hey, what is this? Let's all go investigate. A week later, we come back. This is a great tool and we should implement it. So it's kind of finding that confluence of, if I wanted to be the best database architect in the world, I am now in a zero-sum game with a lot of very smart people. But how many people actually enjoy writing? All of these are hard work. Any one of these parts of the Venn diagram is really hard work. And if you don't enjoy it to some degree, you're just not going to put in the extra time. And this is something I posted on LinkedIn the other day, that you can't beat someone who loves it more than you do, because they will put in the time. And it's not a matter of intellect or God-given ability. And when you find that intersection, that's what really only you can give to the world. And in my case, it was, I got lucky. I managed to figure out with enough introspection of what that is. And also having the humility to say, like I just said, I'm not the best database architect in the universe. I'm not the best writer in the universe. I'm not the best speaker on stage. But you put all these three
Don't
together.
sell yourself too much here.
Let's, being realistic, until someone tells me otherwise, at least. And you find that actually, yes, there is a demand for something in that intersection, and it's worked out really well. I've enjoyed it. Like, as writing as hard as it is, but at the end, once you start to see the form kind of congeal out of the ether into a finished product. And the funny thing is, it's the same process. It's always the same process. What it takes to write a well-crafted thought, whether it's a sentence, a paragraph, an article, or a book, it's the same process. It's that alchemist idea of as above, so below. If you can work out a simple template of, let me lay out one idea, let me then expand that into two ideas, let me link those, let me expand that into a paragraph, that's your book. You just put one foot in front of the other. But at least that's my approach. You two have written a book, and you've done it collaboratively. I'd love to hear about that. How do you separate? You finish each other's sentences?
We would assign sections. We would kind of rewrite each other's stuff to create consistency of voice. We would sit down and go over the outline and figure out how to reorganize things together. We would take turns doing full read through edits, because when you get to the end of that book, you have to go through the entire book and just make sure that everything is, first of all, correct, and second, that there's a consistent tone, and third, that you caught all the typos and grammatical errors and everything else. And so, yeah, what are your comments on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the process. And I would say it's interesting because Matt and I would say, have completely opposite styles in pretty much every area of life, but in particular with writing, which I think is why we get along really well. Like, Matt and I are best friends, and so
I noticed that with Slayer versus Nickelback doesn't get any more.
Yeah, he's huge.
Well, that's not actually representative, but yes,
it was a troll that somehow slipped through.
It was a bit of a troll. I found it when I was reading through the whole book. I'm like, man, that's kind of funny. I'll let you keep it in.
But the so it's interesting too, because I think that the hardest draft to write is usually the first, or what I call the zero draft, actually, which is getting your ideas out. And so I tend to be very much I like everything's planned out. Every day is just write sections. So I tend to try and write 1,000 words or more a day. And that's just kind of how I do it. Matt, he writes too, but I think I don't know. Weekends I would notice he would just spend and suddenly it's it's 30 pages there. And so it's just, that's just how Matt's brain works. And it took a bit of getting used to it for me at first. I think for Matt too, because it's just one of these things that hurts. But it's just different styles. But what really matters at the end of the day is getting it done, right? So it's the outcome that you're focused on, not necessarily the way you get there, right? And so, but the number one thing I would say is just get into the habit of writing, no matter if you feel like it or not. This is your job right now, by the way, and so you have to treat it like a job. I mean, that's what I do, even for this one. I don't know if I'm gonna have a publisher or not, but I know the process now well enough where you just need to write. The idea, the book ain't gonna write itself, basically, is what I'm saying. Those words ain't gonna be on the page unless you put them there. So, and the intention of a zero draft is so even if it sucks colossally, which it will, your zero draft is supposed to be just the most god awful piece of garbage you've ever seen in your life. But the point of that is to get that idea out there. Then you can gnaw on it. And it's sort of, I guess, how the statue David come about. It was, just chipping everything away that wasn't David, I think, is the old saying, right? And so that's what the book is. And so you just need to be ruthless about editing as well. So that's the key. And then I would say too, it's just, you got to have patience. But I would say the way Matt and I did it, running a business, I was remodeling a house, writing a book at the same time. I often joke that smoking 12 packs of cigarettes a day is shooting drugs is healthier than that.
Joe would totally know too. I mean,
it used to be my life. I'm just kidding. But yeah, writing a book, I was like, wow, this feels more unhealthy than the unhealthy lifestyle I had. I'm just joking. But but no, that's the process. But co-author is interesting. It's one of those things where I think, on a personal note, I think I'm so OCD about stuff. I don't know that anyone should co-author with me in the future. I think Matt had to experience a lot of this.
We managed.
Yeah, but I am such a pain in the ass to work with. I'll say that right now. So if anyone's asking which they have, can it be your co-author? I just tell people like nobody should do this. It's a really bad idea. I'm a bit of an asshole. So it's like the one thing there's a couple things I'm like super OCD about, and I'm like pretty ruthless, and like writing is just one of those things. Matt's an angel. He's a saint. He dealt with it. I don't think he should deal with it again, but
hence you are working solo. Now we understand.
That's right. Yeah.
But, speaking of crazy people, we have actually a special cameo appearance here from Chris Tabb. So what's up, man?
Looks like you're in London, Chris. Is that correct?
Here's someone who can tell us about smoking 12 packs a day.
Voice will actually probably be a good example why not to. Been good show. I've been here taking notes, but also seen all of you recently as well, which is quite cool. So I bumped into Serge accidentally, in Mallorca, in Palma, and
accidentally. There's only 5 people here. What are the odds?
Yeah. And then Matt had a good time in New York, where we looked at those mean data streets, New York style. And Joe, you were over here not that long ago, but I virtually seem to speak to you quite often anyway, so I don't feel like it's been that long anyway.
You can survive Mallorca, you can survive New York. That's easy.
Yeah, it was. Well, actually, I only just survived it. I was pretty ill towards the end of it. I only just really, just soldiered on through. I wasn't fighting fit towards the end of it. I'm still on the recovery now. But anyway, back to data.
Good to see you. Yeah, actually, Tony Piazza has a question. Oh, what are you gonna say, Chris? Before I get to this question here.
Oh no, go. No, let's have a question.
Oh yeah. Well, it's be a good kind of group chat for a few minutes, right? So,
okay.
Tony Piazza, he says, he would appreciate hearing everyone's thoughts on conceptual data modeling. Chris, Serge, how about Chris? What are your thoughts on conceptual data modeling?
Conceptually, they're very good. No, I do like him.
Thanks for the input there. Jeez.
They help explain the story at that beginning, and until you've got that that business lens on it, which the conceptual model provides you, is going to make the proper data modeling much harder. I'd much prefer to be given requirements that have a nice conceptual model, and then take that and then physicalize it later, go envirological model. So I'd say I like them.
Serge?
Yeah, ditto that. Plus what I was hinting at earlier, that unless you're doing it on a whiteboard or on a napkin, use a proper modeling tool that's going to allow you to just flip back and forth between conceptual, logical, physical, and without doing any extra work, because they're just lower resolutions versions of each other. And yes, you can, once you get into the nitty gritty, you can create transformation rules from logical to physical, things like that. But you also cannot do that. You can keep them the same. And that way you can show one model to the business, to anyone, to a developer, at any resolution, and keep that vision consistent, because a table with 50 columns is still just a box when viewed on a conceptual level with its relationship to its adjacent table.
That's good. Matt?
And I get my comment on conceptual modeling would be that we need to start doing it earlier in some sense. I think there's a tendency when you're writing code, especially if you're wrapping your data in an ORM, to just write something that works, right? That does the job. And it's like, yeah, but let's think about what we're trying to actually represent here from a business or customer standpoint, and get it into a shape where it's easy to conceive of, easy to process, easy to do analytics, and it makes everything downstream easier.
It should be part of the business requirements. So
exactly. And Oliver, what's up, Oliver? Spoke at his meetup last week. Serge and I did actually in the. But he says he always starts with the knowledge model. Without knowledge, no conceptual model. I tend to agree with that. I think it's the terms knowledge and concepts and so on. They get it. We could probably have a whole episode on just definitions. Let me ask you this. I always like to flip questions. So what would happen and how would the world look if you just ignored conceptual data modeling and just went straight to physical modeling?
You'd probably get duplicate entities. You'd probably get people not actually talking about the same thing. Maybe a party is actually a customer and a supplier, but they talk in different terminology. They'll probably duplicate it, where you actually understand conceptually how they're different, how they interact with each other. I think you'll make mistakes probably in the coding and the delivery part that you'll find later on, and you'll probably never go and fix that technical debt. You get there, but the end product won't be good.
Like you said, if you can flip it on its head, I think the answer is much simpler of what problem is not solved by conceptual or data modeling in general. And I think that's user input. That's pretty much the only thing a data model can't help you with. But even then, maybe on the app side, maybe, but even, just fat finger in data. Everything else, duplicates, consistency, naming, it's all covered.
Well, yeah, I think the absence of conceptual modeling or knowledge modeling, even is you're just going to be highly reactive because you're just literally writing physical implementations to serve very specific questions or needs in this case, and it doesn't address the overall context in which those needs need to be addressed, for example. So. Veronica says we'll potentially miss relationships between things. Speaking from experience, yes, I think we've all seen this before. Like I've said before, lack of a data model, in my opinion, is still a model. It's just a really crappy model, but that's how you represent your reality, or that thin slice of it, and that's but it may not be great, right? So
and I think that's why we've got into this situation, is that I made a note calling it prototype to productionize, because back in the day when you had to design something you knew what limitations you're going to have with either storage, with compute, with contention, with what index it needed. So you'd know, right? Okay, you had those limitations, and you wouldn't even embark on the journey because you knew that you would have to deal with a volume of data, which now you could stick it on a snowflake, probably even a small or something. It would cache it all to SSD local. You could run what would be the worst sort of query off the worst data model. No one would even know. And it's not until you do start and many companies can operate like that, and they have operated like that. And I think that's created a lot of engineers that haven't had that definition of good. It's not because they couldn't do it; it's they haven't seen what good looks like, because they haven't had to define something that was good. And I think you were talking about, Joe, about the OLTP structures and how we should. I think I called it metadata propagation. So I did a post about what's new and what's going to be new in 2023. And I think we talk about data contracts, and you talk about forms where data gets created and enters into your system. At that point, there's a form label. No, someone knows what it is. Someone designed that form. All of that metadata, if that was able to propagate and follow down all the pipeline, streaming, CDC, or whatever it was passed down, that knowledge from the people who designed that system is then passed down. It won't be able to go right the way down, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that could be reused, and then having that into a data catalog later is obviously going to be your end goal. But I think you talked earlier about passing it off to one to the other. It's like, oh, the transaction system, where it's not our fault. Here you go. Here's the database structures. Oh, who knows what goes on now? People have left by then. That knowledge is gone, but it existed once upon a time. And then your machine learning team. Here you go. We've just created a nice big fat table for you. Well, where did it come from? What's that actual definition of this mean? Which systems did it come from? Oh, we didn't capture all that now. All that, it's not available. I think, it all links onto documentation. I think I've had my latest rants have been on documentation. I don't know, bring back documentation was one the other day, because bring back data modeling seemed to get some focus. And the example I used was, your teams out there, they get a Slack call, they get a direct message, and that because they didn't document it. If it was documented, handing over to the ops team with a nice data model, with all the attribution on it, maybe a nice, a nice product that they can go and look at it all in and go and get it and get some comments of the latest information. They wouldn't have to get all those calls directly, and they'd probably end up leaving to go to another job because they're bored of getting all these direct calls. So it needs to have that focus, and I think with what you guys do in the books, with the focus on these shows, with the LinkedIn community that really got behind this, that hopefully we can spread that that common knowledge. I think, Matt, we're at the pub in Brooklyn, and we're talking about, we expect people to have common sense, and I think I did a post about this, is common sense crossing the road, common sense of how to hold scissors, because we've got common knowledge about these things. I don't think that common sense approach to data modeling exists because there's not that common knowledge of what looks good, what's best practice.
There's no baseline, right? There's no base today in 2022. There's no baseline that everyone has been trained on.
Yeah,
actually, Todd has a related question to this because Todd comes from more of a engineering background, and Todd's awesome, one of the smartest people I know, and helped us review our book. Todd asks, isn't conceptual the realm of the bridge between logistics of engineering and the value business needs? Like if I make a database table, I'm doing that based on normalization, storage constraints, et cetera. And the conceptual is probably more at views or function network APIs above it. Is that too engineering focused as a perspective?
So, we talk about business processes, and I think your guy that was on there was talking about the business data modeling, or what attributes get captured.
Yeah, Vichy,
yeah. And there's the same thing with the conceptual. Okay, so if a part of your conceptual which could link to a business process, it's just what level of business process you're talking about. Level 1, level 2, right the way down to level 5. Level 5 is where you're going to have your attributes that are going to be passed through to your data model. But having that conceptual one that can link on, which then business processes, that understanding that whole end-to-end process, they can link onto a conceptual model, is really going to help you understand your APIs that are going to that underpin it. Maybe the applications that are writing it to a separate database. You'll be able to get that full business service view of it, which is links to a conceptual model of the business problem that it's solving.
Yeah. To the chagrin of modeling purists, there really is no agreement about what conceptual is or is not, and what you use and how you model and which details you include or exclude and which semantics, visual is completely up to you, I think. And that's the beauty of it, of as long as you're communicating what the business needs from your data, and they understand it and you understand it, it's like you said, it's the bridge between the engineering and the value business. Whatever gets that point across, that's the tool you use.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I think, deciding, hey, we're going to go on a road trip, guys. Great. We agreed in spirit to this. Where are we going to go? Cool. We figured that out, right? The details of that, that the logical model is figuring that out when you make a map, figure out your route. Driving is how you get there if you're going to go on a road trip, right? That's your physical model. But conceptually, it's like, you all have to agree on the standards of whatever it is you agree to. In this case, it's road trip, and that's what we're doing. Could be any number of other things. Might be a business process, but that's how I look at conceptual models. These are just, are you in agreement on the processes and the things that matter?
Yeah.
Right. What I see often though. Oh, go on, Serge.
I was going to change the topic if you got something to say.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that the final thing is that I see a lot of, I would say, analytics engineers starting backwards in this though, and they start with the physical model. Because again, back to the issue of storage and compute being very cheap. It's super easy just to start with a physical model and completely ignore, conceptual or logical models. So that's all. Serge, next question.
Yeah, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that we've got Chris with us, because one of your recent posts was a topic we were just discussing before you signed in, which is that know thyself, of what is the value that you bring to the table. So what you recently posted was be introspective, learn what your own superpower is, and bring that to a well-balanced team, if I'm capturing the essence of that.
Yeah.
Given that we have a couple of very different backgrounds, but people who've obviously achieved things in their own careers and did it in very different ways, I thought it would be interesting can we explore how do you find your superpower for those that are listening and saying, what am I good at? How do you identify that? Maybe let Chris take the lead, since you've already done some thinking.
I think this business has been the past couple of years has been a bit of a journey of like self-discovery, and also just before I was a Swiss Army knife that had to do everything, and then going on this journey and realizing a slice of my toothpick, someone was better than that than me. The corkscrew, someone was better than me, and gradually I found out, okay, what's the best thing I can bring to the table, and what was my core strength that I haven't found anyone better than me at, and it changes over time. And I think I didn't used to do this sort of stuff. I never used to post all the time and that, but I feel I enjoy it, and I think it adds value, and I'm to focus on that. I'm good at some other things as well, but it's working out of your team. It's not just the technical skills. It's the one that's going to have that visionary. And I call it maybe an architect that they know where you need to get to. They may know those stepping stones. You need someone that has to keep you real. I think that was the other thing I mentioned there, is that, the moonshots are great, but, you may not quite make it. So, having someone to go, yeah, but, maybe we should realign that a little bit. And having that feedback and having someone that will actually in your team that will challenge you is someone you need to have. You don't want to have too many dominant people that just yes men in your team, or yes people in your team, yes ladies in your team. You want someone to ask why we're doing it, ask a rationale, and then provide feedback on it. So I think as with anyone on their career, I've learned different things on the way, and I've learned them all, which have given me a nice broad spectrum on it. But if I work out exactly what I'm good at when I'm able to, maybe that's where I'm able to focus on. But I think being a generalist does really help you get maybe somewhere where you can maybe work out where to specialize.
Cool.
Is there a training idea similar to like medical rotations that would be useful here, where when you're coming out of medical school, like your last year, go do a bunch of different jobs so you can have experience? And I agree, Chris, like really, if you want to be the best, you have to specialize. At the same time, to be the best, you should understand what other people are doing.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think my whole journey of I started writing BI tool of using Cognos. So I understood how to use a report writing tool, but I wanted to know, well, what's it doing behind the scenes? And then I went and did DBA to become a DBA to understand that. And I thought, how do I get that data like that? Okay, I want to understand that. Did a bit of ETL development. And I think each one of those is curiosity, I think it is. And the industry's got so large now, to get that large spectrum of skills now is not as easy as it was. And if you do start in a small company, they don't have that mentoring or people that can show you that best practice piece. So I think the educational stuff that you guys are doing, and books and things like that, and allowing for what I was able to learn on the mean data streets, having a structured way where people can have access to learn by the collective knowledge that we've gained on this journey, and help people fast track and learn by the mistakes and the battle scars that we've had.
Yeah, so the mean is not a euphemism, so that's meant to be taken literally. So can you speak to soft skills as well, since you did mention that?
Yeah, stakeholder skills. I mean, we always forget to talk about business, and the business is why we're here. And without that conversation with them and managing their expectations as well, and stakeholders can be challenging sometimes. So a lot of people tend to go for the low-hanging fruit and hang around with the stakeholders at all the nice ones. There, you actually should be focusing on the ones that are actually very anti what you want to do, and they're the ones you need to work on, win over. If you do that, and that's a skill itself, because you always tend to gravitate to, I'll do the easy job. I'll go to the nice stakeholder that always agrees with me. I'll leave the other one till later. And having in your team, working out who's good at each of those things. Again, that's something we've learned with building up our teams, and when we put them onto a site, it's like the halo analysis as well of like, okay, what people personalities and experience and skills that can provide that matrix to provide the best delivery.
Cool. Joe or Matt, do you want to take a stab at how did you find unlock your own strengths?
It's funny, Joe and I have similar stories. Like, we started in data science and we just kind of gravitated to work that needed to be done. And that's how we ended up doing data engineering. And I think that's a pretty common story, actually. And Joe, you can obviously speak to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think our superpower really is, and I'll speak for Matt, I think is being able to see probably a more holistic picture, because I'd also worked as a software engineer and kind of done a lot of things, really, ML engineering before there was a thing, and kind of everything else. And so, I wouldn't say I'm particularly like amazing at anything, but I do have a big enough perspective doing things in production where I think it's a very unique skill set that was, and I think it was a skill set that was probably appropriate for a point in time too. Like, I think that the cross between a data scientist and a data engineer is one of these things where I don't know if that wave will be around again, really, right? Because now there's data engineering to make these systems for data scientists, and I think that was very much a particular point in time where that could have occurred, at least by accident or more to the point necessity. Now you do it out of more intention because you want to do it, but yeah, it's an interesting question. I think more broadly, my superpower, and I don't know about Matt's, but my superpower has always been to I think obtain knowledge very broadly, and so I read very widely, and I read a ton, like a ton. And I think just asking good questions, and more also just getting to know people in whatever domain I happen to be in. I've always made it a point to seek out the best people in the world, and get knowledge from them.
And you found us.
Yeah,
I found you guys, and here we are. So, but it's but that's to me, that's always been a superpower, where it's just not being afraid to to seek out advice from the best people on the planet. And because I feel like iron sharpens iron in a lot of ways. It's an old saying from sports, but you definitely improve when you can surround yourself with the best people possible. But if they're the best people in the world, great. If they're not, but if they're the best that you can find and they're going to push you, that's really what matters at the end of the day. As the old saying goes, you're the average of the five people around you. So
I think that's a really good point. On my journey, I've had some really good mentors that and they've taken me on different points, and shaped me at different stages. So having people up your game and that you can learn from, and that can and be able to tell you what you need to work on yourself, because none of us are perfect.
Well, you want that. You want people who are going to be honest with you too. I mean, you don't want a bunch of yes people, as Chris called them. But I mean, you want people are going to be nice to you, but also kick the shit out of you when they need to, right? Yeah. That's kind of the old school way of doing stuff, but I find it's effective. So
a little bit.
Rex has a question for you. Who sticks out Chris as a mentor to you?
Who sticks out Chris's mentors? Oh, who
we're going to go a bit longer on this episode, because we're not going to do one for the next 2 weeks. So no, go for a few minutes longer. You don't need to say Santa Claus or something, but I
suppose he's right up there, I suppose, isn't it? But Joe, Matt, hanging around working with the book with you. I mean, I've learned loads on that, and just being involved in these shows and hanging around with different people. Keep chatting to people in the community. There's inspiration and knowledge is all around, and sharing. And we talked about this purist, the people out there, the haters. And I think I had to block someone the other day as well, because if you're not adding value and you don't see other people's opinions, you're not adding to the community. So I can name some of my Ian Blunder, one of mine.
So the person you blocked was your mentor? I'm just kidding.
No. They blocked me.
Anti-mentor, maybe.
Yeah, I met Ian London though. He's a good dude, and he's straight up too. So he'll call you out when he sees it, and he'll be your best friend too.
Yeah, he's called me many names in my time, and he's not the only one as well. I've got another guy, Tony, who's helping me as well, and there's Sonia, who's our she helps me. She helps with my delivery of my messages sometimes, so she does a good job as well. Yeah, but they cost money though. Some of them.
To that end, I think like it's worth pointing out that to get that kind of feedback, you have to transmit that you are someone that could be spoken to honestly and rationally. So many people clam up, so many people get defensive, even when the feedback is constructive. And what's going to happen? Someone's just not going to go out of their way to correct you and let you keep on making that same mistake. Mm-hmm. So that's another like really important takeaway of like be really mindful in the way you communicate and the way you come across. So obviously, if you have an opinion, by all means defend it. But if you see that new knowledge has come to light, be free to let go and accept criticism is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I've always made it a point to try and understand arguments from every angle. I mean, maybe it comes from my past as being a debater or something like that. But the angle you'd have to take is making sure you understand. Okay, I can argue this. Yeah, I can argue your side better than you can yourself, right? And so and so that's. And in fact, I'm going to be doing that at Data Nova, right? I'm going to be doing a debate. You'll get to find out the topic I get to talk about, but you'll be in for a nice surprise. But I'm doing an Oxford debate with it was Andy Mott from Starburst, and it's going to be fascinating. But the thing is, if you can't argue either side of the argument, right? If you're I guess that religiously attached to your views, and I think you just the world's going to shake you up in ways you probably don't like. So, yeah, that's super fun.
The versus Snowflakes, the Snowflake team Snowflake and Team Databricks, they'd have a good debate.
Indeed. Yeah, and I'll just follow on with what Serge was saying about mentorship and accepting criticism, and going back to good debates as well. I think in addition to accepting criticism, like try to really actively engage with whoever is criticizing you. In other words, don't just like take their criticism and say thank you for pointing that out, but like try to have an extended conversation and see their point of view and see if you can build out some kind of like, okay, what can I do better? How can I really improve this? And like actively get their feedback, learn from them.
Yeah, I would say the only time when that what Chris pointed out too. I mean, I know who he's talking about. There's some pedantic dorkwad on LinkedIn who just kept commenting on. He commented on my post and on Chris's post, and it was these weird like bike shedding comments too. Where you're just like, I don't know what point you're trying to arrive at, but this obviously is only meant to serve some weird aspect of your ego, and is not meant to like further the conversation. But you see this once in a while, whether it's on social media or even in conversations. There's just some people like to have, I would say, very self-serving, pedantic, conversations. And those are the kind where I'm like, at that point, I really don't care what your input to the conversation is, because obviously you're not willing to listen to any other side except that which, satisfies your strange fetish for getting strange answers. So not interested in that engagement. So
I'm not very social media savvy, but my experience has been a lot of times when I see something, and again, once it's in public, once it's part of a forum, now there's ego, now there's status. So a lot of times I'll go and I'll just message the person and say, hey, am I understanding you clearly? Or what are you trying to say? Or what's the alternative? And you realize when you do that, a lot of times they just say they don't want to engage. They have no interest there. And you realize, they're just trolls. That's all they want.
Yeah.
They want.
Well, imagine if they didn't have their name on it either.
What's that?
Imagine if you didn't have to use your real name.
Yeah. No, I actually don't want to. But
then you get Twitter actually. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why I'm not on Twitter. So I'm new at this. I'm still a greenhorn. I expect people in LinkedIn are being genuine and looking out for their.
I got rid of most social media, dude. I mean, I got rid of most of it. Twitter, I axed that a long time ago. Facebook, all that crap. I'm still on LinkedIn because I feel like at least there's some sense of implicitly some sense of decorum. for the most part. I mean, obviously you still get some crazy posts once in a while or weird comments, but it's a lot more self-regulating, I would say, versus some other places. Like, you wouldn't have a data chat on like Truth Social, right? That'd be crazy. So,
Speak for yourself.
Or if you
Joe.
did, okay, Matt's been on there a lot, so yeah,
That's right.
So it's the best social network.
And also incredible how we haven't come up with a better alternative. Like everyone's whinging about Twitter now, and I go somewhere else. But where?
Yeah, I tried out the Mastodon thing for a bit. I can't say that I mean, when I was on Twitter, I think I rarely engage with people, and Mastodon is just one of these things where I feel like it's kind of like, I don't know. It's okay. There's just nobody there. So
it's just incredible that if now is not the time for a new social network to emerge out of the ashes of the blunders of Elon Musk, it's never going to happen.
Part of me thinks that we're over social networks in a lot of ways too. I mean, because if you look at the vibrancy of a lot of Slack communities, for example, a lot of these like private chat groups, I mean, it's just sort of moved onto there. But social media for its own sake, I think I can make a pretty good argument it's going away. So just people aren't that interested in it. I mean, if you look at like TikTok, for example, that's not. I don't think that's social media per se. That's people just want to binge watch stuff, right? But that's
it's just a virus that infects your brain. That's what TikTok is, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it pushes the edge of what the word social, because it's not mapping your social network. It's just algorithmically bringing you stuff you like. Whereas, how else do you engage with, the broader community? Like you can get Barack Obama to reply to a tweet. Like where else is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know. Go on Cameo, I guess, and have him send you a video or something. But no, what's interesting though, the conversations. I'm in the data quality Slack group, Chad Sanderson's group, and I think that's one example of I think a great community, right? It's the conversations that happen there, I think, are all constructive. There's a sense of moderation as well, in the sense where there are mods that just make sure you're steering the conversation in the right way. It's not overly marketing heavy and stuff. So I think that's a good example, and there are many others. MLOps community is another great one if you're more into MLOps, and that's been a long-standing community. And there's many other groups, and that's just Slack. I mean, there's other Discord groups and so forth. But honestly, I think that's where a lot of the migration's happening right now, even if it isn't obvious. So, but everyone has their favorite echo chamber. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, Chris, Serge, it was great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Anytime. And good luck. Look in your book. We'll have you back on the show to plug your book when it's out. So awesome. And we're not going to be doing the show for the next couple of weeks because there are obvious holidays that fall like kind of smack dab in the middle of Mondays. So I don't think people want to show up the day after Christmas or the day after New Year's, and so we're just not going to do it. So
it's going to be a very hungover show if we do it the day after New Year's.
It's going to be funny, actually, right? I mean, we could all get the group back together again and sort of slosh around a bunch of nonsense. It reminds me of that. There's a really good podcast I listen to. We Might Be Drunk with Sam Worrell and Mark Normand. It's hilarious, but they just drink a lot, and these are two of some of the best comedians on the planet, and it's pretty hilarious. So.
Have to check that out.
So
Chris had proposed a late night data format at one point, right, Chris? Like sometimes you get a little wild.
We should be inspired by them. We'll watch it, see if we can put a data theme onto it, and we can take all the LinkedIn common themes, but put like an adult rating on it or something, or like parent advisory or something like that, and we just go for it. It's not company related, and we'll have to do a disclaimer at the beginning saying that all these views are drunk views and are not the views that we normally make in a business environment.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like riveting. I wonder who shows up to that. Geez, you have to be some sort of weirdo. Drunk data modeling talks. So that would be quite impressive. But yeah, we'll be back. I think, what is it? January 9th. Let me check my calendar here. We got the next one is going to be it's got Chip Wynn. She's going to be on the show. So she's awesome. She has been teaching the Stanford machine learning class for a really long time, and has a book about machine learning and production. I don't know, Riley, and I consider one of the foremost thought leaders in the world on this topic. So we're kicking the new year off to a great start. By the way, at the end of January, there's a Day-to-Day Texas in Austin. I think it's the 28th is Day to Day. So 20th of January, show up to that. It's probably the most stacked roster I think I've ever seen in my life with data people. So yeah, it's gonna be.
I think I may be there
sick
as well. I'm gonna be trying to head out there.
Chris is gonna be there. Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do that idea of a podcast when we're there then. So
yep.
Yeah, that'd be great. So anyway, yeah, check that out. I know Matt and I actually owe everybody an AMA too. We talked about that a few weeks ago, and we still want to like have that as a separate show. So we'll do that probably in the new year. So anyway, I hope everybody has a great holiday. Whatever you end up doing, I hope it's amazing. So take care, everybody. See you next year.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Matt, Joe, Chris.